It's Monday, so we're talking to John Pateman from the Thunder Bay Public Library. It's James with Net News Ledger. Joining us by Zoom is John Pateman from the Thunder Bay Public Library. John, welcome back to another Monday.
Thanks for having me back again, James.
Always fun at the library. A couple of things. To start with, can you give us an update on what's happening with the Waverly Park Library?
Yep, so the Waverly Park Library is currently temporarily closed, pending some tests of a staff member who had some potential exposure through a family member to COVID-19. So adopting our usual safe and slow approach, being very, very cautious in terms of our staff safety and our patron safety, we decided we would close that facility down until all the test results are cleared and everything's been done behind the scenes to make everything safe as can be, and then we'll be reopening as soon as we can. Excellent.
Now, an issue that has literally exploded on social media, Dr. Seuss. And the library has pulled the copies of the book that the Dr. Seuss company decided to no longer produce. What do our readers and viewers need to know?
Well, I think you started it off with the right statement, which is that this comes from the Dr. Seuss Foundation, the organization that represents the interests of the family and the author. So we have to listen very carefully to what they say when they think, in their opinion, these particular titles are no longer suitable to be on the shelves, whether that's a bookstore shelf or a library shelf, because of some of the imagery inside there. So we took that message seriously, and our first move was to remove those books from the public shelves, from the children's shelves, on the grounds that the organization was arguing that children are able to kind of process those kind of images unless there's very skilled intervention, which most parents aren't able to do, to interpret and explain, etc. They just take the images as they see them, and they're negative images. And given that this organization is an anti-racist organization, that's one of our strategic objectives, we thought if these are deemed to be by another organization, not by us, racist images that could do harm to children, it was our duty of care to remove those items from the shelf. However, we haven't just stopped at that. We've also said to ourselves, well, kind of how are those books on the shelf in the first place? Maybe there's something to do with our collections policy. That's our policy that determines what kind of books we buy. Maybe we should be reviewing that, but let's not just review it ourselves as a library service. Let's turn it into a community conversation. Let's reach out to some organizations and individuals and have that conversation and make changes to that policy to improve it for the future. Because I think given the kind of culture we're in now, with raised levels of awareness of racism because of the whole George Floyd issue, for example, and Black Lives Matter, and of course our own situation here in Thunder Bay, there could well be more of these situations in the future, and we need strong policies, strong anti-racist policies at the library to deal with these situations as they arise.
And even last week, I mean, the Disney Corporation is pulling some of their, what most people would say are classics. Dumbo is being pulled out of the children's area because they've got, you know, characters in the movie doing things and reenacting like the minstrel shows and other things like that. So there's a whole new sensitivity. And I know there's people out there complaining about cancel culture, but when the organizations themselves are starting to take a look at what they've had in the past and make it more up to date, I think that's a good move.
Yeah, and also we shouldn't forget that this is only some of his titles. You know, he wrote lots of different books. The other Dr. Seuss titles remain on our shelves. They are popular generation after generation. His books still are amongst the top-selling books on Amazon, for example, in terms of children's picture books. So we're not cancelling Dr. Seuss by any means. We've still got many of his titles in our libraries. It was just these ones that were brought to our attention that we had to deal with.
So we can still refuse to eat green eggs and ham?
If that is your choice, James, indeed.
Yeah, some of the classic Dr. Seuss's, I mean, you know, they go on forever and they stick with you for some reason. I mean, you know, the Cat in the Hat and the, you know, green eggs and ham and one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, you know, all those things which are really good learning tools for young people are still there.
Indeed, and some of his titles, like the Sneetches, deals with racism as a theme. So he wasn't oblivious to it himself. But of course, like we all are, we're all a product of our time. And at the time that he was illustrating those particular books, those kind of images were acceptable. And today the foundation has decided they're no longer acceptable. And as I say, we listened to that message.
Now, as we move forward, one of the goals that I think we should have in these discussions, and the Thunder Bay Public Library has been amazing on this. One of our first weeks we were talking about how International Mother Language Day was celebrated just before things fell apart with the pandemic. And, the library has a goal of eliminating racism and educating on what is needed reality moving our city forward. So, as we work together on this is going to be something I think we can be sharing with Thunder Bay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are a number of what I call dominant narratives within the city, which is like the story that gets passed down generation after generation about whatever the issue is in the city. But the library service has discovered there's lots of other narratives on the same issue. And we'd love to work in partnership with yourself to understand those narratives, give them some exposure so that we can create this big kind of community type conversation about the issues that really matter, not just to the library, but to the city of Thunder Bay.
Our Thunder Bay matters.
Yes, that's good. I like that.
John, we'll break it there. We'll be back next week talking. I want to thank you for your time this afternoon.
Okay, see you same time next week, James.
You bet. To keep up to date, you have to subscribe. You have to hit that like button and hit the notification to stay in touch.